All right, today we're doing a really deep, forensic dive into a story you probably think you know, Moses and Pharaoh. But we're going to be looking at it through the lens of a classical commentary on the Quran's 28th chapter, Surah Al-Qasas. And what this commentary uncovers is a huge philosophical puzzle hidden right there in plain sight. So let's get into it.
The entire story really boils down to this one very tough question. Can an act of cruelty actually serve a merciful purpose? Pharaoh's tyranny, his decree to kill newborn babies, it feels like pure evil, but the story seems to suggest it was all part of a much larger divine plan. This is the exact theological knot that commentators have been trying to untangle for centuries, and that's what we're going to unpack today.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the incredible paradox of Moses being raised by the very man who wanted him dead. Then, we'll get into the key philosophical tool the commentator uses to solve this puzzle, the crucial difference between an immediate cause and an ultimate purpose. After that, we'll explore the dynamic between raw human fear and unwavering faith when Moses has to flee Egypt. And we'll finish up by seeing how divine providence can show up in what look like completely random events, like a simple meeting at a well.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in a climate of just absolute terror. Pharaoh, the tyrant of Egypt, has ordered all male Israelite infants to be killed. It's into this horrifying world that Moses is born. His mother, desperate, places him in a basket and sets him adrift on the Nile, only for him to be found by, of all people, Pharaoh's own household. Now, right here, this is the verse that creates the entire puzzle. It says, Pharaoh's family picked him up that he might become for them an enemy and a sorrow. You see that word, that? It implies purpose. It connects their action, saving him, directly to the outcome of him becoming their enemy. And, well, that just doesn't make any sense on the surface, does it? It creates a massive interpretive problem for scholars.
So here you can actually see the source text we're analyzing. The whole argument really hinges on this one little Arabic phrase, liyakuna, which translates to so that he would become. It's a word that screams purpose. But just think about it for a second. Did Pharaoh intend to raise his own enemy? Was that his goal when he found the baby? Absolutely not. So the text seems to be describing a purpose that the main actor, Pharaoh, completely disagrees with. And that's the puzzle.
And this leads us to the core question that the commentator is trying to answer. If the purpose mentioned in the verse wasn't Pharaoh's, then whose was it? This is the moment the analysis shifts from just reading a story to a really deep theological exploration of divine will versus human action. The verse is clearly laying out a purpose, but it's a purpose that's totally hidden from the people actually doing the action.
So how in the world does the commentator solve this? Well, the answer lies in a really brilliant philosophical distinction. It's a way of understanding that there are actually different layers of causality working at the same time in any single event. Let's take a look. This chart just breaks it down perfectly. On one level, you've got Pharaoh's immediate surface-level reason for saving the baby. Maybe it was pity, maybe it was just curiosity. That's the human intent. But operating on a completely different, higher level is the divine purpose. God's plan was to use Pharaoh's own seemingly merciful act to plant a future prophet right in the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The commentator uses two very specific philosophical terms for this, and they are absolutely key to this whole argument. The first one is illat. You can think of illat as the immediate cause, the what. Pharaoh saves a baby. The second term is chayat. This is the ultimate why, the grander, final purpose that is often totally hidden from the person who's acting. So, here's the crucial conclusion. When the Qur'an says they picked him up so that he might become an enemy, it is not describing Pharaoh's illat, his immediate intention. It's revealing the ghayat, the ultimate divine purpose that was being accomplished through Pharaoh's action. So Pharaoh thinks he's just saving a baby, but in reality, he's raising the very instrument of his own downfall, all according to a hidden divine script. Okay. Let's fast forward in the story a bit. Moses is a young man now, living in the palace. But after he gets into a fight and accidentally kills an Egyptian, his cover is blown and he is forced to run for his life. This is a moment of pure, extreme human vulnerability. This verse just captures his state of mind so perfectly. He's described as being both fearful and vigilant. He's terrified and he is on the run, looking over his shoulder. This is total survival mode. But in the exact same breath, in that very same moment of panic, what does he do? His first instinct is to turn to God and pray. It's a really fascinating combination of emotions. The commentator really breaks this down piece by piece. First, there's the fear, khaifan, which is a totally natural human response to being in mortal danger. Second, there's the vigilance, yataraqabu. That's his practical awareness, scanning his surroundings.
But the commentator says the most important part is the prayer. It's a pivot. In an instant, he shifts his focus from the danger right in front of him to a direct appeal for divine help. So the key insight here is that Moses' humanity and his faith are not at odds with each other. His fear is 100% real, it's visceral, but it doesn't cancel out his faith. His first instinct, even when he's absolutely terrified, is to trust. It shows us that fear and faith can exist side by side in the very same moment.
So Moses' journey takes him far away from Egypt and into the land of Midian. He gets there as a total stranger, a fugitive who has absolutely nothing. And it's right here, in this seemingly random place, that the next stage of the divine plan starts to click into place. He shows up at a well, a very common, everyday scene. There's a group of shepherds watering their animals, and off to the side, he sees two women waiting because they can't get their own flocks to the water. It seems like such a simple, mundane encounter, right? But according to the commentator, absolutely nothing here is an accident. Looking at the source text, it is so clear that the commentator sees this moment at the well as being incredibly important. This is a key juncture where the divine plan becomes visible, not through some big, flashy miracle, but through a chain of what look like totally normal events and everyday human encounters. Let's just break down the commentator's analysis of this so-called coincidence. First, the journey itself. Out of all the places he could have gone, Moses ends up at this exact well. Second, the encounter. The two women he happens to meet just happen to be the daughters of a prophet who will eventually become his father-in-law. And third, the catalyst. A simple act of kindness, watering their animals for them, is the very thing that kicks off the next decade of his life, providing him with a family and a safe haven. And this slide really captures the commentator's ultimate point perfectly. We tend to look for God's plan in these huge, dramatic miracles, like the parting of the Red Sea. But this analysis argues that the divine purpose, the gayat, is woven just as powerfully into the small, mundane, everyday moments. A chance meeting at a well, a simple act of kindness. These are the very threads that make up the grand tapestry of the divine plan. And so this whole forensic reading of this ancient story leaves us with a really powerful and I think personal question. If an act of pure tyranny can end up serving a divine purpose, and if a moment of intense fear can exist right alongside deep faith, and if a simple, mundane chore can actually be a pivotal moment of destiny, then how are we supposed to interpret the puzzles, the challenges, and the seemingly random encounters in our own lives? What hidden purpose, what ghaya, might be unfolding just beyond what we can see?